All right, welcome to 19-3, where we start talking about blood typing. Blood typing is super, super important. We never want to give a patient a incompatible blood type, because if we give a patient an incompatible blood type, their immune system might say, wow, you look foreign, you look terrible, let me destroy you and get rid of you, and then activate this entire immune response, which would completely ruin the entire purpose of actually even getting a blood transfusion in the first place. So let's talk a little bit about what a blood type even is and what that even means and what that looks like. So let's go ahead and start with the different types of blood types. So we call it the ABO blood typing system. And this is the most basic way that we actually identify the different types of blood types. This is very, very basic. If you actually go in and have a blood test done, they can evaluate all these other pieces, all these other markers that are part of your blood type that we're just not going to talk about in this course. So these are kind of the bare bones. So make sure that you understand this before you add anything else onto your list. Okay, so ABO blood type, because we can have A type, we can have B type, we can have O type, we can also have AB type. And we kind of have to talk about what all of those mean. So if we have an A type blood, that means on our red blood cell, we are going to have A type antigens on our blood cell. And if we're B type blood, that means we're going to have B type antigens on our red blood cell. I'm just going to draw those as squares. And if we're O type blood cell, that means we're not going to have any antigens on our blood cell surface. All right, that's part one. So I'm going to type antigens here. All right, in addition to the red blood cells, we also have to think about what's happening in the blood plasma. So in the blood plasma, we're also going to have some antibodies that are going to be good at detecting cells that are not like the cells that we are originally making. So if we are originally making A-type blood cells, we don't want to attack A-type blood cells, but we want to attack everything that's not A blood type cells. So in the blood plasma, we are going to have anti-B antibodies. Because we like A antigens, so we don't want to attack A antigens because that's self, but we want to attack anything that's not self, so we're going to attack those B antigens. Same thing for the B blood type. Instead of having anti-B antibodies that would attack self, instead we're going to have the anti-A antibodies, and I abbreviate antibodies as AB. And the O type blood, they don't have any antigens present, so the plasma is always going to be like, well, I don't want to be anywhere near any of this baloney, so we're going to prepare for either A or B antibodies, anti-A or anti-B antibodies. All right, why does this matter? All right, so if you have A-type blood, right, you probably don't interact with someone who has B-type blood and vice versa, because if the A-type blood started interacting with someone who had B-type blood, well, these anti-A antibodies would actually go and attack the antigens on the A-type blood cell. And then the vice versa would also be true. If you had O-type blood, you could go and hang out with the B-type blood or the A-type blood, but you just also have to make sure that you don't have any, you also want to make sure that you don't have any of these anti-antibodies present, because those would attack both the A and the B-type blood. So generally, excuse me, whenever we create a blood transfusion, we're going to separate the red blood cells from the plasma cells, but we're not always 100% sure that we did that correctly. So we always want to keep in mind what's actually happening with the blood plasma of the patient and not assume that we're just getting rid of all of their blood plasma. All right, that's part one. Part two, we need to talk about what it means to be positive or negative, right? Like you might be A positive or B negative or AB positive or O negative. And what does that even mean? What does the negative or the positive even mean? Well, the negative or the positive all relates to what we call an RH factor. And there's some name for it. Rhesus factor. It's like RHEUSUS factor, I think, something like that. I'm not quite sure how it's spelled. But this is also like it's like another antigen. So just like we were talking about the A or the B antigens here, we can think of the same thing for the RH factor, except these factors may or may not be attached to the red blood cells, so we always have to kind of assume that they're there. So if you are a cell that has a positive blood type or a cell that has a negative blood type, we need to talk about the differences between those. So whether or not you're A or B or AB or O positive, you are always going to have those RH factors either as antigens on the cell surface or as antigens kind of floating around in the plasma. And then if you're negative, so if you're A or B or AB or O negative blood type, then you're not going to have any of this on the red blood cell. And likely, if you've ever been exposed to the Rh factor, you're actually probably going to make some anti-Rh factor antibodies just to protect yourself. Okay, so hopefully this all makes sense. And if none of what I said just made sense, make sure you rewind the video and rewatch this, because this is very, very important that you understand this for this unit, and things are going to be a little bit more complicated here in the next couple seconds. So make sure that you review everything I just said before continuing on. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. I'm going to go in green here. So let me make sure I covered everything. Okay. So what happens whenever you have, like, let's say you have an A positive blood type and you accidentally mix it with someone who also has with someone who has a B negative blood type, for instance, right? So the A positive blood type are going to have the anti-B antibodies, and the B blood type is going to have those anti-A antibodies. Oop. Right? So these anti-A antibodies are going to attack the A plus blood, and the anti-B antibodies are going to attack the B blood. So at the end of the day, what is this even going to look like? So the A plus blood is going to look like all of these antibodies are going to be attacking those antigens. And the way we draw antibodies is usually like a Y, either upside down Y or right side up Y. And so that's just going to be coating the entire cell. And the same thing would be true for B as well. And the reason why we coat this entire cell is because this makes the cell much bigger and much easier to flag by the immune system. So the immune system is like floating around and is like, oh, alert, what is this? This looks like a cluster. Let's go ahead and take care of this. And so they will initiate some sort of immune response to actually attack all of this, just because these antibodies are like, oh, look, there's a problem here. We should attack this. Get rid of it. Figure it out. So that's why we don't want to cross-contaminate anyone or give them the wrong blood transfusion. So that's why it's really important to understand compatibility between these different types of blood. And so here, this picture I really like, I should also mention that whenever we have all these antibodies attached, that's what we call agglutination. So agglutination is the process of having all of these antibodies actually bind to those cell surface antigens. Okay. Now I want to kind of go through this picture first before we keep going. Go away. Okay, so this picture here, we're talking about in the top left-hand corner, we have the type A antigen. So the A is drawn as circles. And then the type A blood has those anti-B antibodies in green to the right with those triangle pictures. And then the type B blood has the opposite. So the type B blood has triangles as their antigens, and then circles as their anti-A antibodies. So you can imagine those anti-A antibodies are able to bind to those A antigens because they're circle and circle. And the anti-B antibodies are triangle, and those combine to those B triangles. So if at any point we were to mix A and B blood, bad news bears, right? Those anti-B antibodies would attack B blood, and those anti-A antibodies would attack A blood. All right, if we had type AB blood, the cell surface is going to have both A and B antigens. And since it has both A and B antigens, we definitely don't want any antibodies in the blood plasma. Because if we did, it would attack self, and that would be stupid. So we don't have any of those antibodies in the blood plasma, so that's why nothing is towards the right of that image. And then the opposite is also true. If we have type O blood, that means we have no antigens on the blood cell surface. And instead, we're going to have antibodies that are both going to attack A and B type blood. All right. Make sure this slide also makes sense to you before you continue. All right, so blood typing. So how do we even, how do we even figure this out? Like, who is able to donate to who and who's able to accept what? So first and foremost, we have to talk about the universal donor, which is O-, and the universal recipient, which is AB+. And let's talk about why this is the universal donor and the universal acceptor. So this is the universal donor because O-, right, we have a red blood cell with nothing on it, and we don't have any Rh factors. So we're just a bunch of basic red blood cells that have nothing on them, and basically no discriminatory points for the rest of the immune system to flag. We're just a bunch of red blood cells carrying hemoglobin, going about our day. Happy news, I'm going to go undetected by the immune system. great as can be. So we can really be donated to anyone, any type of blood type, right? Including O negative themselves. Versus AB positive can definitely not donate to O negative, because if we were, AB positive could donate to O negative, as long as we separate the blood plasma. So let me take that back. But AB positive is going to be the universal recipient, because it's going to contain both the A and the B antigens, right? So it will be recognized by, or it will be able to recognize both A antigens and both B antigens. So any of the anti-A, anti-B antigens won't actually, anti-B and anti-A antibodies won't actually attack this red blood cell, because this red blood cell has both of them. So it won't attack itself, which is great. So any type of blood could be donated to this. A or B or O or a combination thereof could be donated to this person. Therefore, the universal recipient. So how do you really actually figure out, how do I actually really know who's going to be what and what? I highly recommend that you create some sort of table like it's pictured here on the left. And I actually have this in D2L, I believe, and if not, let me know in case that's wrong. I'm pretty sure it should be in there. But I would create a table. And in the table, I would include every single blood type. So A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus, AB plus, AB minus, O plus, and O minus. And then I would think about what antigen is present and what antibody is present, if there is an antibody present. Is the Rh factor present? And if the Rh factor is present, is there any anti-Rh factor antibody present? Right? And so we want to do this for each and every single one. And I think this is a great way to really figure out how comfortable you really are with this information. So I would literally do it like this, and whatever, go down the whole table. Thank goodness this actually knows what a straight line looks like, because clearly I cannot make a straight line. Look at that. It's a terrible straight line. Still a terrible straight line, even with my... Okay. All right. So like an A plus blood type, is it going to have an antigen? Yes, it's going to have A antigens. Is it going to have an antibody? Yes, it's going to have an anti-B antibody. Is it going to have an Rh factor? Yes, because it's positive blood type. Is it going to have an anti-Rh antibody? No, because it's plus type and we don't want to attack itself. No. What about like B plus blood type? Actually, let me just skip down. Those ones, I think those ones you guys can do on your own. Let's go to AB plus. Wow. Obviously, these tables are not equal and not pretty at all. So please make this as useful as it needs to be for yourself. So, okay, so AB plus type, or let's do AB minus blood type. So AB antigen, it's going to have both A and B antigens. Antibodies, none, because we don't want to attack ourselves. Rh factor, no, because we have negative Rh factor, which means that if we've ever been exposed to Rh factor, we're probably going to make the anti-antibodies to fight ourselves against that. So we might have this. Yes, maybe. If we've ever been previously exposed, right? So I would kind of do the same exercise for literally all of these. And if you ever feel uncomfortable or second-guessing yourself, let's go over it together. Or chat with your other classmates and go over it together with them. But I think this is a really great way to figure out if you really actually understand what blood typing means. If you really, really want to get a good hold of it, then I would add another table towards the right and start talking about like can donate to who and can receive from who, because then you'll really solidify this information. Okay, so speaking of donating and speaking of receiving, let's talk about why this really, really matters. One of the primary examples, or one of the easiest examples, I shouldn't say primary, but one of the easiest examples to relate all of this information to is something called the hemolytic disease of the newborn. Wow. Newborn. Okay, so lytic cell death, newborn fetus, right? Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. This actually used to be a huge problem until we figured out really what was the cause of it. So it used to be that there used to be a bunch of, I don't even want to call them miscarriages because I'm not quite sure at what point in the term were they discovered to be unfortunately dead fetuses. But at some point, there were a bunch of children that just weren't making it through gestation. They just didn't make it for whatever reason. And it took a while for people to actually really discover and have enough good specific equipment to be able to read what's actually on these cells to figure out, like, oh, these cells are different than these cells, and these cells are probably attacking those cells because they are different. So it took a while for this to be discovered, but once it was finally discovered, then it started becoming part of the standard prenatal care for those with uteruses that are carrying to term. And for those people, it's now part of standard of care, and it's considered good prenatal care if someone is actually double checking that your blood type and baby's blood type are compatible. And if you don't have good prenatal care, then you're kind of hedging your bets. You may or may not go through this. It just totally depends on the genetic makeup of both you and baby. So it's really important to have good prenatal care, and we'll talk about why whenever we talk about how we actually prevent this disease after we understand what's actually going on. So in this first picture here in the left-hand side, I have that the child is Rh positive and the mother is Rh negative. So regardless if it's A, B, or O, right, baby is positive and mother is negative. Okay, so let's imagine we're in gestation, right? And baby started making its own red blood cells, and baby started making its own red blood cells, and those antigens are on the red blood cell surface. Well, some of those antigens don't only exist on the red blood cell surface. They are also able to travel in the blood plasma, and they're really, really small in the blood plasma. So small that they can actually cross over the placenta. Red blood cells are too big. They do not cross over the placenta. So mom's blood and baby's blood do not mix. I repeat, mom's blood and baby's blood do not mix. Okay? But the antigens that baby's producing are small enough that they can cross over the placenta. They're these really, really small proteins. And when baby's positive Rh factor crosses, so the Rh factor that's present starts to cross over the placenta, mom's immune system is like, whoa, who are you? Where did you come from? And why do you exist? And the immune system is like, I don't care, I'm going to destroy you regardless. And so the immune system sends out antibodies, which is pictured in the third picture here, anti-Rh antibodies, to go and attack and flag those Rh antigens and say, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to get rid of you, right? And unfortunately, those can also cross over the placenta. And if those also cross over the placenta, then they can get to baby. And then if they get to baby, then baby now all of a sudden is a target by the immune system. And so the immune system, mom's immune system says, bye bye baby, get out of my system, right? So the immune system is actually physically targeting the baby because the baby's producing that Rh factor, that antigen. And so this is what we call hemolytic disease of the newborn, because mom hasn't been yet exposed to the Rh factor. So mom doesn't know that Rh factor being made by her own child is safe, but the immune system doesn't think it's safe. So that mom's immune system is going to target babies and therefore try to get rid of baby in utero. And so that's why it's really important during good prenatal care. I think there's 3 rounds of injections or something like that, where they first test your blood type and baby's blood type to make sure they're compatible. If they're not compatible, then they'll give you the injection, I think by the end of the first trimester. I might be wrong on that. And then they do it again before the beginning of the 3rd trimester, and then one more time right before delivery, I believe. But it's kind of tricky because if people don't have good prenatal care, then I'm pretty sure they give it to you right before you deliver anyway, just in case you haven't received any good prenatal care. So they just cover their bases, because what happens is if during delivery mom's immune system has never been taught to not attack Rh factor. And if during delivery, like either through a C-section or through vaginal delivery, there's a lot of blood involved in both. If mom's blood ever gets mixed with baby's blood during that procedure, during either procedure, then mom's immune system might still be activated to produce that Rh antibody. And if mom starts making that Rh antibody and has another child that is also, again, Rh positive, but mom is still Rh negative, then before baby even gets a chance to like implant or develop through the first trimester, mom's immune system is already attacking it, so it stands no chance. So these doses during good prenatal care are meant to train mom's immune system to say, no, this isn't a bad guy. You don't want to attack this. It's okay. This is part of, like, it tricks mom's immune system into thinking that it's part of mom's immune system and that mom shouldn't attack self. So that's the whole point of those injections. Okay, so the whole point, right? Baby has to be positive and mom has to be negative. Doesn't matter if it's A, B, or O for either. Baby just has to have the Rh factor and mom doesn't have to have the Rh factor. If the opposite were true, right? So if let's say mom was positive, baby was negative, then it wouldn't even really matter, right? Because if mom was positive, mom is always going to be exposed to Rh factor. So whether or not baby even carries Rh factor doesn't matter. Because if mom has been creating Rh factor, then mom recognizes Rh factor and doesn't want to produce anti-antibodies to attack itself. So if baby is creating either positive or negative, and baby is either creating Rh factor or is not creating a Rh factor, then mom's blood is happy either way. It's like, oh, I recognize you if you're here. If you're not here, whatever. You're a red blood cell. Cool. Good for you. All right. So again, mom's blood is not mixing directly with baby's blood. Mom's blood and baby's blood never mix. Okay. O2 can be diffused, nutrients can be diffused, really small proteins can go back and forth in the placenta, but red blood cells are too big. They can't pass through the placenta. So we're talking about really, really small antigens and antibodies that are passing through the placenta in this case. All right, I'll meet you in the next one for white blood cells.